Okay. It is 6 p.m. Second here. Yeah, we are going to look up a topic here. See what we come up here. Yeshua. Joshua. Okay. Yod He Vav Shin Ayin. This says Yehoshua, later Yeshua. Oops. That's from the Enhanced Brown Driver Briggs Hebrew and English Lexicon. Yod apostrophe is salvation. It became to be associated with, and I believe this term here is Yoshia. Let's copy this. Did we come up with Yasha? Salvation? Okay. Well, no, what could be that? It could be Yasha. It could be, yeah, salvation, help, rescue, literally, deliver. Yeah. Associated with that, chiefly Matthew 1:21. She shall bear a son and will call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. All right, let's get into something here. Um, where do we want to start? Jesus Christ. All right. Um, mhm. Sermons, journals, preaching resources, recommended reading, uh, systematic theologies. You know what? Let's get a interlinear Bible. And I purchased one. So let's see here. Tools, guides. How do you change the Bible that you're using? That's the thing here. Do. Forgot how to use this software. Was search and links application. No. I have an interlinear Bible. I'm not really familiar with this software here. Is this the New Testament? This is the Old Testament. This is the Bible. Is this the new? Yes, here we go. Go to Book of Matthew. Biblios, the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christos. Jesus Christos. I want you to see this fourth line here. Jesus Christos. The third line here is the Greek. Jesus Christos. And it's more um, normal form. But how it's actually rendered in the text here, and this particular verse has a different ending. Let's see that the sigma is not here at the ending of this, nor is it at the ending of Christos. So here gets the actual what it says in this part of the text. Jesu Christu. Now, here's a quick video on the differences in the wording of the Greek language, depending on whether a name is in the genitive, dative. Oh, there's several different forms here: genitive, dative, accusative, and there's two other forms of Greek. Whereas the ending of a name or word may change depending upon how it's used in the sentence. And this is how it's rendered here in Matthew 1, verse 1. Okay. Now we can keep scrolling through here and try to find Jesus again. So I think we'll do that. Let's try to find um it. So this is the term. Try. And I'm just scanning here quickly. Trying to see it with the, here's a good one here. Jesus. This one has the sigma. You can see where the top row matches the third row. And this one says, let's see, Jacob and to become the parent of the Joseph, the man husband, Mary, by from whom to bear Jesus, to call his name Christos. And here it has a sigma at the end of Christos. You can see how this slightly differs, Jesus and Christos here, versus the way it's rendered in verse 1. Jesu Christu. Now let's go to Matthew 123, because I know specific, or is it 121? I think it's 121, where Jesus is given his name. Here we have, okay, and the angel, where's the angel at? Okay, Behold, the angel of the Lord, and during a dream appeared or to him to say to Joseph, son of David, not to be afraid to take Marianne, which her name was Miriam, Hebrew, not to be afraid to take Mary, the woman, to be your wife of you. For in he to beget, to conceive from the Spirit, to be holy. In other words, conceive from the Holy Spirit, to give birth to a son, and to call the name of him, or call his name. You got to understand that different languages has different word orders, so it doesn't flow fluently when you're translating word for word from Greek to English. Here we have Jesus, and here has another ending here. So Yesun. This is not a V, by the way. This is a Greek letter. It's not a V, but it's Yesun. Again, here's the normal rendering of it. Jesus. This is Greek. This is Latin. But it's saying here, is that Latin? Maybe just using Latin letters to render it. Not certain how that's working there, but anyhow, Yesun. So you can see how it changes here. So in the Greek text, the name of Jesus which is Jesus in Greek, does vary in spelling throughout the New Testament. As we can see, we're just looking right now at the book of Matthew. Book of Matthew. Let's take a look a little bit further here. Here we have it again. Here it's ye soon. And I wonder if it tells you the. Shouldn't have clicked on that. Strong's Greek 24:24. All right, it doesn't really say. It doesn't get in here again. Jesus, Yesu. Now let's just look at Judah here. Judah, Judas, Judah. Here, there's a different spellings. So Judas or Judas and Judah without the sigma at the end. Do. Skimming through here a little bit more. We're going to move on and get to my point here. It'd be easier if I had an English translation open. It can follow and find easily in the name of Jesus and then just come back here and pinpoint it in the Greek text. But because I'm not doing that way, it's taking me a little bit longer. Just bear with me. Nazareth. John the Baptist here. She's came to John. Tells him to repent. Okay. So he prophesies about the Messiah. He's going to baptize with the Holy Spirit. Here we go. Here we have Jesus. Here's this rendering, this particular form of his name, Jesus here. Jesus here. You should be seeing his name a little bit more because if we get into chapter 4, here's the temptation of Jesus. We have Jesus. Two more times here. Jesus. Jesus. Whoa, we just did. Yeah, I don't know what happened to my my mouse. Just skipped a whole bunch of passages here. What are we even in the same? Are we in chapter 5? I believe we're only in chapter 5, so maybe didn't skip that far down. All right. It felt like a huge dramatic jump. All right. I don't think we need to really keep digging. Maybe we'll find one or two more here, but yeah, I think you're getting the point here. More commonly rendered with the sigma at the end, but other times it's rendered without the sigma and a different Greek letter. Okay. Let's stop. All right. Let's go to the Old Testament here. We're going to go the book of Joshua. Talk about Moses. Here we have Joshua the son of Nun. Yeshua. This is a different variant of it. Where let's see where Joshua shows up again in the text. Here we have it. Joshua. This is chapter 1, verse 12. Here we have Jesus. This is the Greek Septuagint. You can see Lexem, Greek, English, Interlinear, Septuagint. Jesus. Dun, 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 dun. Joshua's got to be a little bit more prevalent in the book that's named after him, you would think. Trying to find his name a few more times here in the book of Joshua. And I may be missing some of it because I'm just scanning with my eyes as best as I can for a 45-year-old. Where we at? Here we have it again. Chapter 3, verse 1. Joshua, Jesus in the Greek. All right. Now, Joshua's also mentioned in Ezra and Nehemiah. Now, I don't know how the Septuagint, this version of Septuagint renders things where they have their word order. And doesn't have Ezra and Nehemiah. Oh, here we go. Ezra, Nehemiah. Let's see here, because this is post Babylonian exile times. And the name of Joshua takes a little change, although it doesn't change in Greek. I think it's 8, chapter 8, verse 17. Let's see here. Yeah, verse 11, 14, 16, 17. Oh, this is hard. I'm not even sure if this is in the proper. Okay, Nehemiah 8. Thought it would be around this part here. Son of Levi. Um, and then again, this could be ordered after the not the Christian ordering of verses, but the Jewish ordering of verses, which in some cases slightly differ. I mean, the Bible wasn't written with chapters and verses, so those are done by whoever's compiling them. So let's see here. Just trying to find. If they actually put Jesus in here. Okay, let's try Joshua. Why is this not coming up? Um, I-E-S-O-U-S. Okay. This might help me. So here we have the different. Now this matches the way it is in Matthew chapter 1 verse 1. And this is talking about Joshua. Joshua. This is Ezra Nehemiah. However, when you look at this in the Hebrew, and I can't tell what this is because this is second Esdras, which is Ezra Nehemiah. This is chapter 19. So I don't even know how this is corresponding per se to the Hebrew Masoretic text because they're calling it second Esdras, and it's a compilation of both books here, Ezra and Nehemiah. So it's kind of hard for me to follow this. But maybe let's go and let's look at Hebrew Bible Ezra. Let's do Nehemiah. Do we have it online? Nehemiah, I think it's chapter 8, verse 17. Yeah, since the days of Joshua, the son of Nun. Here we have it as, where is it at? Right there. Yod Shin Vav Ayin. Now this actually says Yeshua. 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 This is for Joshua, the son of Nun. But it's rendered in the Septuagint as Jesus in Greek. All right, let's go to this video here real quick, and hopefully we don't get a copyright strike. Let's go to playlist here.
It was really Asus is what they were calling out. Asus is.
All right, don't listen to Billy. Billy's wrong. This video here. Mark Stephen Francois. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. There's a little bit about his background. I recommend you visit his page. Okay. He has a good video in here.
This is your brain when you're struggling to focus.
All right, give it a second here. We'll speed it up too so we don't get a copyright strike.
So the question that we're going to be taking a look at in this video is, how did we get the name Jesus in English? Now, the reason why that's an important question for us to be asking is because if you take a look at the way that the word Jesus was pronounced in Hebrew, it sounds quite a bit different from the way that we pronounce the name Jesus today in modern English. So in Hebrew, the name Jesus was pronounced Yeshua. Yeshua. That is way different from the way that we pronounce the name Jesus today. So the question that we're going to be asking in this video is, how did we go from Yeshua all of the way to Jesus? So let's get right into it. So the most important thing that we need to know as we're answering this question is that the name Jesus in English wasn't taken over directly from Hebrew into English. The reason why the name Jesus sounds so different in English compared to Hebrew is that the name Jesus had to pass through several different languages before we reached the form of the word Jesus and the pronunciation that we have for the word Jesus in English today. So the first language that the name Jesus had to pass through was the Greek language. Now, the reason why Greek was the first language that the name Jesus had to pass through was because the Old Testament was translated from Hebrew into Greek. Now, you might be wondering, what does the Old Testament have to do with the name Jesus? Doesn't Jesus show up in the New Testament? Well, we have to remember that the name Jesus in Hebrew was simply another form of the name Joshua. Yehoshua ended up becoming Yeshua, and that had to be represented some way in the Greek language as the Old Testament was being translated into Greek.
All right, so we're going to pause there because, and I'm just reminded, I could have done, there was A much easier way I could have done this. I could have gotten my article from WordPress and I could have shown you guys this way. It'd been a whole lot easier than trying to manually search in logos. Oops, sorry. Oh, no, this is not the article we're looking for. We're going to go back here. Size name. Let's just go in view mode. Okay. I do have these. These are actual images I took with my phone of the Greek Old Testament, Greek New Testament. I have these books. Here we have the New Testament. And this is what I showed you in the Logos Bible app software. Jesus here without the sigma. Yesu. It's rendered there. Here with the sigma. There with the sigma. Here is the Septuagint. We have the Yes. You can see with the I at the end. How that looked earlier in the Logos Bible app. We have Jesus here. This is the book of Joshua, by the way. To Jesus. You can see the English text on the side showing that this is representing Joshua. So this is the this is exactly what the New Testament authors use. They were just copying what was already used for Joshua in the Greek Old Testament, which was translated before the time of Christ. Okay. Then you go to Nehemiah. Here's that verse we were looking at. The days of Jesus, here it says in the English. Here it's Yesu, son of Nun. In the Hebrew, we have Yeshua, although it says Joshua there. This is Yeshua, which is the shortened form of Joshua. Joshua typically is Yod, He, Vav, Shin, Ayin. You can see it better here. Yod, He, Vav, Shin, Ayin. Here, where it's used here in Nehemiah, which this photograph I took here is dealing with, it's Yod, Shin, Vav, Ayin. The shortened form. All right. I won't get into all this. If you're reading this, it'll make more sense. I don't want to read all of it. It gets confusing here. I don't. Let's go back though, because there's one thing I want to point out here. The angel Gabriel spoke to Joseph in Hebrew, and he told him to name the child in the womb of his soon to be wife, Miriam, a name which in Hebrew means salvation. Not Miriam, but Jesus' name is what I'm referring to. The angel said, "You shall call his name Yeshua, salvation, for he will, Yoshia, he will save his people from their sins." This is a play on words, which makes sense in the Hebrew language. And it's a common naming formula used throughout the Old Testament. Similar to how Yitzhak, which is Isaac's name in Hebrew, is related to the Hebrew verb for laughter. I can't pronounce this word. Okay. A lot of names are like that. I was coming across it in the Bible the other day, and I should have wrote down that passage. There was another good passage that had that same play of words, and things of that nature. But that's off. That makes sense though. But there's a reason why he told him to call him that. It's because his name, he would save his people from their sins. So there's a meaning behind why they did it. Now, Yeshua is the Hebrew name. I will give room for it being the longer form, Yehoshua. There's a possibility it could be that. But it seems more than likelihood that it's Yeshua. Now, Jesus was used for both Yehoshua, I'm sorry, and Yeshua. So that's why I said I give room for that. But Jesus is a transliteration of Yeshua, not the longer form Yehoshua. Okay, but let's get back into this video.
So the first part of the name Yeshua consists of the letter Yod followed by the vowel Tsere, and it's pronounced Ye. How do you represent that sound in Greek? Well, there was a very simple way for them to do that. They simply used the letter Yota followed by the letter Eta, and it would be pronounced in exactly the same way as in Hebrew, Ye. The problem
Yeah, in Greek, if you wanted to get the hard G sound like in Jesus, you would not use this iota. You wouldn't use the Greek iota. You would use the gimel. No, wait. No, gimel's the Hebrew word. What is the letter in Greek? Just a second here. Let's Google that. Gamma. We would use the gamma. There's no J in Greek or in Hebrew. So to get that hard G sound, you would use the gamma in Greek. So this would start with the gamma. If it was supposed to pronounce with the hard G. But there's a reason why it's pronounced with the hard G in English. We'll get into that. We'll explain that. There's no problem with using Jesus. It is a transliteration. You want to know what a transliteration is? It is simply carrying across the sounds of a word into another language using the alphabet of the language you're taking it into. So you can only do that with that language given alphabet. So if the language doesn't have a particular sound or letter that the originating language has, you can't represent that in that. So this is what happens with the sheen, the Yeshua sound. You can't get the sh sound in Greek because they don't have that. Nor do they have like a standalone H letter in the Greek. So it's just the s sound comes across. This is why, like, when you look at the Hebrew word hallelujah, you don't get that when you render it in Greek. Just go to the book of Revelation where they talk about hallelujah. It is rendered without the H. It starts with the A. Alleluia. Because Greek doesn't have that letter.
Comes with the second letter in the name Yeshua in Hebrew. The second letter in the name Yeshua is the letter Shin. The letter Shin is an SH sound like we have in English. The problem is that there is no SH sound in Greek. So when they were rendering the name Yeshua into Greek, they had to find the closest equivalent in the Greek alphabet. And the closest equivalent in the Greek alphabet was the letter sigma. Now there's quite a bit of difference between the letter sigma, which makes an S sound, and the letter Shin, which makes an SH sound. Sh versus S. But that is the reason why we have a S sound in English as opposed to the Sh sound that we have from Hebrew, because the name Yeshua went from Hebrew into Greek. The next letter that we have in Hebrew, or the next portion that we have of the name Yeshua in Hebrew, is this vowel that we have here, which is called shurek. This shurek is an U sound. That was a sound that could easily be made in Greek using an omicron and an upsilon. The final letter that we have in the Hebrew rendering of Yeshua is ayin, which doesn't end up being rendered into Greek because it doesn't really make that much of a sound during this time when the Old Testament was being translated into Greek. Now, the final letter that we have in the Greek form of the name Jesus is the sigma. And you might wonder, where does that S sound come at the end of the name Jesus? Now, that final letter in the name Jesus, the sigma, is actually a grammatical ending that indicates the grammatical function that the name Jesus has within a particular Greek sentence.
Now, pay attention to this. This is the important part.
Now, of course, Greek grammar works quite a bit differently from the way that English grammar works. In English grammar, the grammatical function of a particular noun is determined to a large extent by word order, the relationship that that noun has with other words within a particular sentence, but normally determined by word order. In Greek grammar, however, the function of a noun within a particular sentence is indicated to a large extent by the ending that a particular noun has. We're going to take a look at a couple of examples using the name Mark as it would be rendered in Greek, and we'll see how the different endings that the name Mark can take will be determined by the function that the name Mark has within the sentence. So the first example that we have is the sentence, Marcos went to school. In this case, the os ending indicates that Mark is the grammatical subject of the verb went. Marcos went to school. The second example that we have is, he is the brother of Marku. Notice that the ending for Mark has changed from os to u. In this case, u indicates a relationship or possession. In this case, particularly a relationship. You couldn't say he is the brother of Marcos. You would have to say he is the brother of Marku. The next example that we have is he wrote a letter to Marco. In this case, Marco functions as the indirect object of the sentence. And so the ending that we have here can only be O because Marco functions as the indirect object of the sentence. The final example that we have is he sent Mark-on to the store. In this case, the on ending indicates that Mark-on is the direct object of the verb sent. So when you take a look at all of these examples, it's clear that the endings of Greek nouns matter when it comes to the grammatical function that the noun has in the sentence. So when it comes to the name Jesus, this is simply the equivalent to the os ending that we saw in Markos. And in this case, the sigma at the end of Jesus indicates that Jesus is the grammatical subject of a verb. It could be the predicate of a verb as well, but it indicates the grammatical function that the name Jesus has within the sentence. So the reason why Jesus in English has an S at the end of it is because it didn't pass directly from Hebrew into English, it had to go through Greek first. And Greek has to indicate the grammatical function of a noun, or a name in this case, using endings. And in this case, the ending is the sigma. So how do you render the Greek name Jesus into Latin? Well, in this case, it's actually way easier compared to what we...
Why did it go into Latin? Well, it's easily to be explained. By the 3rd century, the church is primarily Roman. The predominant church at the time was the Roman church, and they used Latin. The first language predominant. I can't say that. I don't know. I wasn't around. What we can say is that we know that the scriptures were compiled, other than in the New Testament compiled, other than in Greek, were compiled in Latin as well, and they rendered it in Latin. And then those Latin texts, like Jerome's Vulgate, and the copies of the the Greek texts that they had, they used those, but they rendered those into English. So they didn't have any. If there were any Hebrew copies of the New Testament, any of the letters were written in Hebrew, they weren't preserved. We don't have any of those. So they didn't have the Hebrew to directly translate that into English. They had to rely on the Greek and Latin.
We saw with the Hebrew name Yeshua being put into Greek letters. So in this case, we have the Greek name Jesus, and the Latin equivalent is pronounced in exactly the same way, Jesus. But in this case, the letters actually look quite a bit more familiar because English uses Latin letters. So how would the Latin name Jesus have been rendered in early Old French? Well, in this case, the spelling would have been exactly the same. The problem, though, was that Latin went through a number of phonological changes that had a huge impact on the way that Latin letters were pronounced. So in the case of the letter I, when used as a consonant, which would have had the exact same sound as the letter Y in English, there was a huge phonological shift through a process called palatization and affrication, which shifted the Y sound in Latin to the J sound, the exact same J sound that we have for the J in English, even though it still would have been rendered or represented by the letter I in early Old French. So we have the name Jesus in Latin, but in early Old French, it would have been pronounced something like Jesus, Jesus. Now, if you know anything about modern French, you might be a little bit confused here, because you would know that the letter J in French, which is descended from the letter I here, is not pronounced in the same way that we pronounce the letter J in English with the J sound. So what's going on here? Well, in early Old French, the letter J, or the letter I, which is the way that it was rendered back then, was pronounced with the same J sound that we have in English. However, through a process called de-affrication, it ended up being pronounced with the J sound that we have in modern French today. However, words that were taken over from French in early Middle English still retain that J sound in English. All right, let's take a look at a couple.
So are you catching that? Let's back that up a little bit.
Old French, it would have been pronounced something like Jesus, Jesus. Now, if you know anything about modern French, you might be a little bit confused here, because you would know that the letter J in French, which is descended from the letter I here, is not pronounced in the same way that we pronounce the letter J in English with the J sound. So what's going on here? Well, in early Old French, the letter J, or the letter I, which is the way that it was rendered back then,
Old French,
was pronounced with the same J sound that we have in English.
Then that sound, before it changed to a Z sound, that was carried over into English.
However, through a process called de-affrication, it ended up being pronounced with the J sound that we have in modern French today. However, words that were taken over from French in early Middle English
were taken before modern French,
still retain that J sound in English. All right, let's take a look at a couple of examples from early modern English of French words that were taken over into English at a much earlier stage.
We're looking at early modern English of French words that were taken over into English
in the language, and we'll see that the sound J is still preserved in these words. Let's take a look at these examples. So the first example that we have is the word jest. Now notice that the word jest is spelled with the letter I, but in this case the letter I has the same value that it did in early Old French. It has the J sound. The next example that we have is the word majesty. Notice again that the word is spelled with the letter I, but in this case the letter I should be pronounced J, just like it was in early Old French. The third example that we have is the word joy, again spelled with the letter I, but with the J pronunciation. The fourth example is the word judge, and again.
So we had the Greek letter iota rendered in Latin with whatever that Latin letter that looks like an I. That was carried over to English like a letter I, but it started to take on this French J sound that had influenced English language.
It's spelled with the letter I, but notice again that the pronunciation is the exact same thing that we would have in early Old French, the J sound. And the last example brings us to the question that we're talking about in this video, which is how did we get the name Jesus in the way that we pronounce it in English today? Well, notice that the word Jesus is spelled with the letter I here, but it would have the same rendering that it did in early Old French. It would have.
And let's pull up a 1611 King James Version, because I also have that. This is a photocopy of a 1611 King James. This isn't mine here in this photo, but I do have it. So you can see it's IESUS here, IESUS, IESUS. So that's 1611 King James. This is Old English.
Have the J sound and would probably have been pronounced something like Jesus. Let's see how this is rendered in the 1611 version of the King James Version. This is Matthew 1:21. And she shall bring forth.
Now his version of it is the one that looks like mine. It's got the more stylized letters where the S, look at the S, how stylized that is. It doesn't look like an actual S. And she shall, son, and even son is spelled differently. This is Old English though. All right.
A son, and thou shalt call his name Jesus, for he shall save his people from their sins. So notice that in the 1611 version of the King James Version, the name Jesus is spelled with the letter I. But just because it's spelled with the letter I, it does not mean that it didn't have the J sound. This J sound is the exact same J sound that we had in early Old French, this time preserved in English with the name Jesus. So how did the name Jesus come to be spelled with the letter J instead of the letter I, as it is in the 1611 version of the King James Bible? Well, the reason has to do with the fact that the letter J originally was not its own separate letter. The letter J was simply a stylized version of the letter I. So we're not talking about the sound that the letter J makes, we're talking about the letter J as an independent letter in terms of representing another sound. So the letter J was simply a stylized version of the letter I. Eventually, however, the stylized version of the letter I came to be used to represent the I when it was pronounced with the J sound that was familiar from early Old French. So let's take a look at the way that Matthew chapter 1 verse 21 was rendered in the 1637 version of the King James Bible. It says, "And she shall bring forth a son, and thou shalt call his name Jesus," or Jesus, "for he shall save his people from their sins." Now in this case, the spelling of Jesus is different, but the pronunciation in all likelihood was the exact same pronunciation as was used in the 1611 version of the King James Bible. The only difference though is that in this case, that letter I, which has the J sound, is now being represented by that stylized I, which is now the letter J, which we have in English. And so that's where we get the name Jesus from in English. It starts off with the Hebrew word Yeshua, goes into Greek, Jesus, into Latin, Jesus, into early Old French, Jesus, into what we have in English today, which is Jesus or Jesus.
And the whole point of why I'm even bringing this up is that you'll have people say that Yeshua is not the Messiah's name, it's Jesus. But the way we even get Jesus comes all the way back to, it's like a stream, all right? Let me pull up a stream. Stream flowing downhill. See if we can get an image of that. Yeah, commercials. I apologize. I don't have
ATTR, cardiac
Yeah, we don't need the loud sound. But here's the source. Let's say the source is up here, Yeshua. And as it's going through different languages, you do end up with Jesus at the. It's all from the stream. But if you cut off the source, let's say you cut this off and we put a line, giant line around here, we block this off and say this is not his name, none of this water flows down here. You can't get any. So if Yeshua, which means salvation, is his name, and you say it's not, and you block this off, the water does not move past where that thing is blocked off. And down here, where you have Jesus, that's further away from the original source, you don't have salvation. You can't block off the source and say salvation's down here, and you done blocked out where it came from. That's dangerous. That's the whole point why I'm making this video. It's dangerous to say things like that. It's very dangerous. You don't want to say that. Studies show yourself approved, okay? Now, why is his name Yeshua and not Yahshua? We'll get into that. People say his name is Yahshua or other forms like Yahoshua, Yahushua. It has to have some variant of the name Yah. And they get this from let's open up Logos again. They get this from actually Logos. I use that for personal. Let me go to eSword real quick here. That's kind of open. Oh no, it's opening up here. Let's go back to the Bible here. Let's go to John 5. Just want the Bible, man. Come on. All right, I think it's 43. They get it from this verse. I have come. Oh my gosh, I should not be clicking on things. I have come in my Father's name, and you do not receive me. If another comes in his own name, you will receive him. And that's where this comes from. Because the Father's name, which we find in the Old Testament, begins with Yah, and his poetic form of it is Yah. They say that has to be in Jesus' name. But where does Jesus say anything about his name? He doesn't. The only name mentioned here is his Father's name. He doesn't say anything about his own name. He just says, I've come in my Father's name. I'm going to show you something else here. I might have to Google this because I don't know where the passage is, the actual passage is. Where are we at? John 10:25. Go to chapter 10. Here he says, okay, let's go up one more. The Jews were then gathered around him and were saying to him, how long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, Christ, tell us plainly. Jesus answered them, I told you, and you do not believe. The works that I do in my Father's name, these testify of me. Here again, he says nothing of his own name. He's talking about the Father's name. He's doing something in the Father's name. Works. He's doing works in the Father's name. The other passage, which, can we hit the back button? Is there a back button? I don't have it. Oh yeah, we just go back to 5:43. We'll just scroll back up. The other passage, he just mentions that he came in his Father's name. Let me show you a passage here. With David. First Samuel 17:45. So that's where we need to go. First Samuel 17:45. Okay. This is David talking to Goliath. Then David said to the Philistine, you come to me with a sword, a spear, and a javelin, but I come to you in the name of, here we have the tetragrammaton, which is characterized by the oversized capital L and the normal capital ORD of host. So this represents the tetragrammaton, the 4-letter name of God. He said, I come to you in the name of Yud-He Vav-He. Some say it's pronounced Yahweh. Some say it's pronounced Yehovah. Some say it's Jehovah. Some say it's Yahuwah. Some say it's Yahuwah. Some say it's all these different variety of ways. I just say Yud-He Vav-He, 4 letters, because I know for a fact that's what the letters are. Yud-He Vav-He. What are the vowels? That part I do not know myself. Other than that, I do know the poetic form. When it's Yod-He, we do know it's pronounced Yah. That we do know. Okay. But I've come to you in the name of Yud-He Vav-He of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have taunted. David's name didn't contain this name. So why must we interpret John 5:43, where Jesus says, I have come in my Father's name, to mean that his name contains Yah in it, or Yud He Vav He in it? We don't put that same interpretation when it's David saying it. It just means David had the authority. He was coming into the authority of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel. Jesus is just saying the same thing. I've come in the authority of my Father. That's what he's saying. Not saying Yud He Vav He or Yah is contained in his own name. Just not saying that. Okay. By the way, Yeshua would be Yod. The vowel would not be represented by any of the consonants of Hebrew. You'd have the Hey, then you'd have the Sheen, and you'd have, maybe a Vav, an Ayin. Okay. But that's not anywhere rendered for Joshua, anywhere in the Old Testament. You have a missing Vav. There would be a Vav here represented by either a U or an O. So it would be Yahoshua, which at that point, when you have that many syllables in Hebrew, this rendering here gets changed. The emphasis would be on the shu part, and it would be Yehushua or Yehoshua. It wouldn't any long carry this Yah accenting on the hard Yahshua. It would be Yehoshua. Okay. Oh yeah, I had the verse right there. Sorry about that. So here, this can't be silent. Yahshua has the silent Vav, and it's not rendered that way in the Bible. So you can't. That's not a proper. That's not a proper pronunciation. I recommend you reading this article. It's on studying at the feet of the master. Oh, I think the website I have is blog.com. Studying at the feet of the master, blog.com. You could just look up, go to WordPress, look at the various, let me see. Maybe I do have. Do I have? Yeah, studying at the feet of the master.wordpress.com. You can get this article here, read all this. I probably have tons of typos, probably lots of them. I recommend reading this. Sometimes I go back and I read my own stuff, and then I like, oh my gosh, how did I word this? I made a mistake here. I made a mistake there. I apologize for that. Don't have anybody proofreading most of what I put down here. So, if you want more about this information, I recommend you read this. Okay. Really recommend this. And with that said, that's all I wanted to share about the name of Jesus in Hebrew, Yeshua. Let's always honor him. Whether you say Jesus, Yeshua, Jesus, maybe you call him Jesus in Spanish, maybe you call him Isa in Arabic, and all these different things. We're talking about the Messiah of Israel. Could go into another topic about calling on his name, using his name. That would make it a longer video, but that's an entirely different topic that we're not going to touch on this. This is just simply to point out why you'll see in my videos that I oftentimes use the name, the Hebrew version, Yeshua. And that would have been, what probably either that or Yehoshua, Yehoshua. That would be the alternate way, which is the longer form. He could have been called that too. But yeah, I recommend for more information about this. I've already written about this topic. I'm not going to make it a longer video. Check out the WordPress article or the blog post that I made regarding the name of the Messiah. And with that, that's all I had.